Yeah.
Things have changed really quickly here in fantasy, and I think that's one of the themes I would say of this season is like how quickly things can change. You feel like you're on top of the world. You
Yeah.
feel like everything, you're right about everything, and then the next week we're like, holy shit, what were we talking about? I
Yeah.
would say one of the players that's defined that more so than anything has been like Marvin Harrison this year.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison has really been the epitome of like, one day we're talking about him as a generational prospect, the next we're all wondering why we drafted him, and then he reminds us, oh shit, this is who he is. And it's like he's kind of, established himself as this, mid-tier kind of wide receiver too, where some weeks he puts up wide receiver one numbers and looks the part. Others, maybe he has a harder matchup. It's just not there for him that week. And now he's, underperforming, and we're wondering why we drafted him in the, well, people, not we, but some people
Yeah.
drafted him in the first round, second round, right? But we saw like earlier in the year, like the mega spurts, like the quarter that he had against the Rams, and then he had the next game right after that, and then a few duds. And it's like we had another breakout game from him later on this year. He's a tough player to gauge because
Hmm.
the emotional investment is this guy could be a league winner down the stretch. He was a top pick that I drafted off of my team. But then the emotional part of that as well is shit, he's not living up to the hype. Damn it. I see what Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors are doing, rookie wise. And it's tough, I think, to kind of gauge that value. For me, I have Marvin Harrison as like kind of that DJ Moore territory, that wide receiver two who can
Yeah.
have elite weeks, but will probably have some bad weeks just because he's not. I would say this: I don't think he's the main option in the passing game. And I think that was the clear expectation here is that he was going to command 130, 140 targets, be this alpha wide receiver one. I don't think he's the main target in this game. And I think it's Trey McBride. So I think I have
Yeah.
him as more of a wide receiver too. And it is matchup dependent if we see those elite weeks or not. But I do think he could be an elite down the stretch.
Yeah, I would say he's like how I would view him going forward is kind of mid wide receiver too. But I do realize, or I do recognize, and kind of what you said with Trey McBride, he just has a stud guy playing with him. And the other thing too is just kind of Kyler. Like Kyler's been very up and down this year in terms of passing. Um, so it's, and I don't know if Kyler can. I think Kyler's very good. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know with like the rushing that Kyler also possesses, where some of those, some potential receptions and passing attempts are going to come out of the offense just because he's a mobile quarterback that can escape the pocket. But with Marv, like I don't think there's any question. I think Marv's an elite talent coming into the league. Like obviously he still has he can get better. I just think he was an elite prospect. And this kind of what you start to see though. I will say this is that last week, I mean, he played Miami. Miami, I don't know how good they actually are. I don't think that they've had a lot of great quarterback matchups that they played great wide receivers throughout the season. But
We
they're
haven't had anybody that's had to score points on him because Tua's been hurt.
yeah, so it's just and I think they played like Indianapolis and Tennessee. It just hasn't been like great guys that they played, but it was on paper a tough matchup last week, and he had a really good game. What I will say with Marv too, that's interesting, and I talk about this a lot, is just kind of the second half season breakouts for these rookies where you could potentially start to really see him. Maybe this is the start of it, where now he's getting going. Now, him and Kyler are starting to figure things out. So I recognize that this could be a situation where I say mid wide receiver two, but I wouldn't be shocked if for the rest of the season he finishes it kind of as a back end wide receiver one, just because he was drafted with the fourth overall pick in the NFL draft. Everybody thought this was an elite wide receiver coming out of the out of college for years now. So I recognize that there's a lot of upside. I just don't know if he can really get there with Trey and then also with Kyler. I don't know if they'll really be able to support him as a back end wide receiver one, but I do think that there's the potential there for him to finish out the season as a back end wide receiver one.
I think this is the perfect opportunity, and unfortunately, like I think there might be better days ahead for Marv, but I think this is also the perfect time to sell a Marvin Harrison who had
Yeah,
111
that's not
yards, a
bad.
touchdown. Like the one thing we haven't really seen, like, and we keep alluding to it, but this isn't the Cliff Kingsbury offense of old, and I think for whatever reason we attach that to this Cardinals team. Like they play a different style of football. Kyler's only thrown over 220 yards twice this entire
Yeah,
year. Marv's only seen over 8 targets once this year. Like it's
yeah,
not like he's getting force fed and peppered with targets. They use James Conner in the run game. You talked about Kyler's legs. They'll use Kyler's legs to continue to move the football downfield. they will use these other receivers. You know, Michael Wilson has stepped up and had a nice role this year with the team. And obviously, we've seen Trey McBride really command targets at a high level this year. So I don't know that Marv even really fully breaks out to like that wide receiver one this season. I think we can see it in spurts. And I think we will have games like last week where we see him go for over 100 yards and a score. But I think it'll be tough on a consistency basis. And especially if they can avoid certain matchups, I think they will do that. The good thing is, I think down the stretch they have a pretty nice schedule against like
Yeah.
Carolina and the Rams in the fantasy
He's got
playoffs,
a really
which
good
could bode
schedule down the
well. But
stretch.
I think over the next few weeks, you know, you got a tough matchup this week against Jalen Johnson. They got Sauce Gardner the week after that, and then a bye. So I kind of just see Marv like maybe he'll exploit some of those matchups and be able to play, but he's a player I would sell high on right now just because of the uncertainty. And this is, you know, I think the optimism is like you drafted him for the second half of the year. Rookies tend to go off in the second half of the year. Rookie receivers in general tend to peak towards the end of the year. And I think you might be able to get a nice piece out of this, especially in your more casual leagues or your leagues without savvy players. They might see this and think, okay, the breakout is fully here. Whereas I think we've talked about it, more wide receiver 2 than he is wide receiver 1. I think your dynasty leagues, though, you definitely hold it. You see the talent that's on the field. It's just it comes down to like redraft sometimes about being really strategic when you sell players. And to me, after like a bunch of bad weeks and then finally a 20-point week, you're like, to me, this seems like the right time to sell Marv.
So who would you sell him for? Like, would you rather have him or Devontae Smith?
Give me Devontae Smith.
Him or Devontae Adams?
I would probably go Devontae Adams.
What about him or Garrett Wilson?
Oh, Garrett Wilson, 100%. Garrett Wilson, he's
He
a
looks
dog,
good,
bro. He's a
dude.
dog, bro.
He's tough.
He's a dog.
I guess I
You
would
going
kind
the
of
wrong
view him
way. You
as
going the wrong way. Marv, I'm going this way with Marv.
well, no. I think that Marv is kind of I would say kind of like a little bit below those guys. I would say Marv is more.
He like Terry McLaurin-esque to me.
I would rather even have Terry over some of those
Exactly.
guys.
What
That like
about
so I think
like
he's kind of
Jalen Waddle? T.
yeah, I would
Higgins?
say he's kind of like down towards that range where like I'd probably even rather have George Pickens over him.
Yeah.
Although I don't know. I don't want to overreact to like the mid. I don't know. I think that there's definitely a lot of upside with Marv. I do. I still think that, and especially like you said, after the bye, I mean, after the bye, you get Seattle, you get Minnesota, which Minnesota, good defense, but my God, are they getting killed by wide receivers? You
Yeah.
get Seattle again, you get New England, you get Carolina, Rams. Like that's a really good second half of the season schedule. But once again, I don't know if Kyler can like support these two high end guys for the rest of the way. Is kind of my
The
it,
biggest problem
if
is
it
the
was like
consistency.
Stroud, I think if it was like a quarterback, like a more pocket passing quarterback,
Yes.
hell yeah, I'd be in all in on that. But I don't know if Kyler can truly support both of them high end numbers.
At some point in his career, we are going to see that. It's just
Oh
his
yeah,
rookie
for sure.
year in this
It could be
offense.
down the stretch. We'll see.
And I think consistency is the biggest thing for him. It's can he get to the levels where we can trust him on a week to week basis? And not
The
every wide
targets need to
receiver
go
one
up.
is like that, but we need to see some weeks where we're getting like 10, 12 targets. Like
Yeah.
we need more of those.
Should you rather have Malik, Neighbors?
Yeah.
Yeah, same
I'm
here.
there. I'm there.